Well, stop scrolling because I've got 20 single-player games that will totally suck you in. Story, action, adventure, all the crazy stuff you wish you could be playing right now. I'm sure you'll find at least one game here that grabs your attention, and maybe I can even convince you to give it a try. But if not, stick around anyway. I'll be sharing my honest opinions on some of my favorite games, ones I've actually played start to finish. Let's go! Vampyr is such a weird, ambitious project that came out in 2018 from Don't Nod Entertainment. You probably know them as the people who made Life is Strange, so you already know they love their heavy choices and this action will have consequences mechanics. But instead of a high school girl taking Polaroids, you're a surgeon in 1918 London during the Spanish flu. The setting is honestly peak aesthetic. It's disgusting, muddy, and everyone looks like they haven't slept in 3 weeks, which fits the vibe of a guy who's literally trying to balance his Hippocratic oath with the fact that he wants to rip everyone's throat out. The developer, Don't Nod, really swung for the fences here by trying to mix a AA budget with AAA ideas. They used the Unreal Engine 4 to make London look super atmospheric, and while it isn't the smoothest game ever, sometimes the combat feels a bit clunky or floaty like a budget Dark Souls, the actual systems under the hood are genius. Every NPC in the game is part of a district health bar. If you start eating too many people, the health of that district crashes, more monsters spawn, and you basically turn the city into a graveyard. The craziest part is the XP system. In most games, you kill monsters to level up. In Vampyr, you get a tiny bit of XP for fighting, but you get massive amounts of XP for embracing eating the citizens. The game is literally tempting you to be a villain just so you can unlock the cool shadow abilities. If you want to be a no-kill hero, you're going to be underleveled and miserable for 20 hours. It's a total social experiment. Plus, you have to talk to everyone to sanitize their blood by curing their headaches or fatigue, just so their blood is worth more XP later. It's messed up when you think about it. You're literally fatting up the lambs for the slaughter. This was during that era where AA games were starting to get really good again, proving you don't need $1 billion to make a game with a soul. It's got that AA jank where sometimes a character's face looks a bit like Play-Doh, but the voice acting for Jonathan Reed is top tier. He sounds so tired and posh, which makes it even funnier when he's diving across a room to bite a priest. If you're bored, this is the kind of game you can just sink into because the lore is endless, and the music is all depressing cellos that make you feel like a Victorian edgelord.
Nothing to eliminate us. You believe you're just fighting a disease, but it's you, the disease, Jonathan, you!
Now we're actually talking about a relic from the golden age of edgy gaming. This game dropped back in 2009 from Radical Entertainment, and it's basically the ultimate power fantasy if you're bored and just want to turn your brain off and destroy an entire city. This was the peak of the PS3 and Xbox 360 era, where every main character had a hoodie, a gravelly voice, and a serious attitude problem. You play as Alex Mercer, and the story is basically that you wake up in a morgue with no memory, but you have these insane shape-shifting powers because of a virus. The cool thing about the developers, Radical, is that they used to make the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction game, and you can totally tell. They basically took the Hulk's movement, running up walls, leaping over skyscrapers, throwing cars, and added a bunch of gore and blades. It's one of the most fluid open-world movement systems ever made. You don't even need to use the streets because you can just sprint vertically up the Empire State Building and then glide across Manhattan like a flying meat glider. The consumption mechanic is what makes this game legendary. To get your health back or to learn information, you literally grab people and absorb them into your body. When you do that, you can shapeshift into them to hide from the military, which is actually kind of a clever stealth mechanic for a game that is mostly about exploding helicopters with your bare hands. You have these different forms, like giant claws, a massive blade arm, and these hammer fists that just turn people into red mist. It's honestly gross, but in a very satisfying 2000s way. Historically, this game came out right at the same time as Infamous on the PS3, and there was this huge playground rivalry about which game was better. Prototype was definitely the crazier sibling. While Infamous was more of a polished superhero story, Prototype was just pure unhinged chaos. You could grab a civilian, run to the top of a building, and elbow drop a tank from 50 stories up. It's the kind of game that doesn't really get made anymore because everything now has to be prestige and emotional, whereas Prototype just wanted you to be a biological weapon in a sandbox. Sadly, Activision basically killed the franchise after the second game and shut down Radical Entertainment, which is a total crime. Playing it now, the graphics are definitely a bit dated, and New York looks kinda gray and depressing, but the sheer speed of the gameplay still holds up better than most modern games. If you're bored and want to feel like an unstoppable monster for an afternoon, this is the one. Just Cause 3 came out in 2015, back when big open-world games were all about freedom and chaos. This was Avalanche Studios at their peak, the same team that already made Just Cause 2 a cult favorite. Instead of changing the formula, they doubled down on what people already loved and pushed it way further. Bigger map, better physics, better movement, more things to break. The game takes place on a Mediterranean island called Medici. It is bright, sunny, and looks peaceful, but it is under full control of a brutal dictator. You play as Rico Rodriguez, and honestly, the story is just an excuse. The real goal is simple: free the island by destroying everything tied to the regime. Bases, statues, fuel tanks, radar towers, bridges. If it belongs to the enemy, the game wants you to tear it down. What makes Just Cause 3 stand out is how it treats destruction like a toy. This is not a cover shooter where you hide behind walls and play it safe. The grappling hook is the core of the whole game. You can attach enemies to objects, cars to buildings, helicopters to the ground, or two guards together and just let physics do the work. Then there's the wingsuit, which completely changes how you move. You're not running from mission to mission. You are flying across the map, diving off mountains, gliding between bases, and chaining the grappling hook mid-air to stay moving non-stop. The map itself is huge and actually fun to explore. It is full of military bases, towns, hidden challenges, and random chaos. You might start heading to a mission and suddenly see a convoy or a base nearby, and one thing leads to another. 30 minutes later, half the area is liberated and you forgot what you were doing in the first place. That kind of distraction is what this game does best. Gunplay is decent, but it's not the main attraction. Vehicles are where things get crazy. Jets, tanks, helicopters, boats, sports cars, monster trucks. Everything feels like it exists to break the world around it. Explosions look great, buildings collapse, bridges fall apart, and the game engine really shows its strength here. Avalanche built their tech around physics, and Just Cause 3 is basically a showcase of that. This game also came out during a time when single-player sandbox games were still made just to be fun, not padded with live service stuff or endless grinding. You boot it up, you mess around, you cause destruction, and you log off satisfied. No pressure, no deep systems to memorize, no boring realism. If you're bored right now and want a game that lets you shut your brain off and just enjoy pure freedom, Just Cause 3 still holds up. It's messy, loud, sometimes dumb, but in a very honest way. It knows what it's trying to be, and it never pretends to be anything else.
Choppers are inbound. Repeat, choppers are inbound.
Sunset Overdrive is basically what happens when you give a bunch of developers way too much sugar and tell them to make a game that hates every single rule of modern shooters. This game came out in 2014, and it was made by Insomniac Games. You definitely know them because they made the Spider-Man games and Ratchet & Clank, but before they were swinging around New York, they made this neon-colored masterpiece for the Xbox One. Back then, everyone was trying to make games look realistic and gritty and brown, but Insomniac decided to make a game that looks like a soda commercial exploded. The story is hilariously stupid in the best way possible. Basically, a giant company called Fizzco releases a new energy drink called Overcharged Delirium XT, and it is so toxic that it turns everyone who drinks it into these gross orange mutants called the OD. You play as a guy who used to be a literal janitor, but now you are the coolest person in the city because you can grind on rails and bounce off cars like a professional skater. The main rule of this game is that you never stop moving. If you stand still on the ground for more than 2 seconds, you are basically dead meat. You have to be constantly grinding on power lines and wall running to stay alive, which makes the combat feel like a rhythm game mixed with a shooter. The weapons in this game are absolutely unhinged. You aren't just using boring assault rifles. You have a gun that shoots exploding teddy bears and another one that fires vinyl records that bounce off walls and slice enemies in half. It is pure chaos and it never stops being funny. The game also breaks the fourth wall constantly. The characters know they are in a video game and they will literally make fun of the UI or the respawn animations. It has this punk rock vibe that feels very mid-2010s, but it still holds up perfectly today because there is nothing else that plays like it. It is actually kind of a tragedy that this game didn't sell billions of copies, because it is way more fun than most of the stuff we get now. You can see how Insomniac used everything they learned about movement in this game to make the movement in the Spider-Man games feel so good. If you are bored and tired of games that take themselves way too seriously, you need to play this one. It is loud and colorful, and it treats the player like they actually want to have fun instead of just doing chores in an open world. It is the perfect cure for boredom, because it is impossible to be grumpy when you are grinding down a skyscraper while launching fireworks at mutant soda drinkers.
That's all of them! Time to check out that penthouse.
Shadow of the Tomb Raider came out in 2018, and yeah, a lot of people don't like this one as much as the other two. You will see that opinion everywhere. But honestly, this game gets way more hate than it deserves. And a lot of that comes from people expecting non-stop action instead of what the game is actually trying to do. This is the last game in the reboot trilogy, and by this point, Laura is not learning how to survive anymore. She already knows how to fight, climb, and kill. The game shifts focus away from shooting and leans more into exploration, tombs, and old ruins. If you go in expecting Uncharted-style action every 5 minutes, you might get bored. But if you enjoy exploring, solving puzzles, and being in quiet, dangerous places, this game does that really well. The jungle setting is one of the best parts. Everything feels thick, muddy, and alive. You're climbing through ruins covered in plants, swimming through dark water, and crawling through tight spaces. The tombs are bigger and better than before. These are not quick side rooms. Some of them feel like full levels where you are moving water, using fire, ropes, and timing things right. This is the most Tomb Raider the series has felt in a long time. Combat is there, but it is not the main thing. When fights happen, stealth is clearly the preferred way to play. You can hide in mud, disappear into bushes, and take enemies out quietly. It feels more grounded and less like an action movie. Some people hate that, but others actually enjoy slowing things down. Story-wise, it is not perfect, and yeah, Lara can be frustrating at times. She makes dumb choices and causes problems, and the game does not always explain things well. That is another reason people dislike it. But as a single-player experience, it still feels solid and complete, especially compared to a lot of modern games. If you're bored and want a game that lets you explore, solve puzzles, and chill in a big, detailed world, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is worth playing. It's not loud or flashy, but it is a good game that gets judged too harshly. Call of Juarez Gunslinger is basically the best Western game that isn't Red Dead Redemption. Honestly, it might even be more fun than Red Dead if you just want to blast people and not spend 40 minutes riding a horse across an empty field. This game came out in 2013 and it was made by Techland. They're the same Polish developers who made Dying Light, so you already know they are the masters of making first-person games feel punchy and satisfying. The coolest thing about this game is the narrator, Silas Greaves. He's this old, crusty bounty hunter sitting in a saloon telling his life story to some random people for free drinks. Since he's an old man who has had way too much whiskey, he is a total liar. He is what people call an unreliable narrator, which means the world literally changes while you are playing based on what he says. If he tells the people in the bar that he actually escaped through a secret tunnel, a door will literally just appear in a rock wall right in front of you. If someone in the bar calls him out and says his story doesn't make sense, he will say something like, "Oh yeah, I forgot." And then the game will rewind and you have to play the section again but with different enemies. It is a genius way to tell a story, and it keeps you from ever getting bored because you never know when the map is going to shift around. The gameplay is pure arcade goodness. It is fast and loud, and everything looks like a comic book because of the cel-shaded graphics. You get points for headshots and long-distance kills, and you can level up 3 different skill trees to become a monster with revolvers or a beast with a shotgun. They also have these duel mechanics where you have to focus your aim and keep your hand near your gun to win a standoff. It feels so much cooler than the duels in other games because it actually takes a little bit of skill and timing. You also get to meet real historical outlaws like Billy the Kid and Jesse James, but Silas usually treats them like they're just another Tuesday for him. Back in 2013, this was actually a pretty small digital-only game, and it was super cheap. It was Techland's way of apologizing for the previous game in the series called The Cartel, which was a total dumpster fire that almost killed the whole franchise. Gunslinger was them going back to their roots and just making something that was meant to be fun above everything else. It doesn't have a massive open world or 100 side quests, but it is perfect because it's about 5 hours of pure adrenaline.
You went in there alone to confront those criminals.
Look, if you want a game that actually respects your time and doesn't try to sell you a battle pass every 5 seconds, you need to check out Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. This game came out in 2021 from Eidos Montreal, who are the same people that made those really smart Deus Ex games. Everyone was super scared before it launched because the Avengers game from the year before was such a massive dumpster fire, but this one actually ended up being a total masterpiece that nobody saw coming. The best thing about this game is that it is a pure single-player story. You only play as Peter Quill, also known as Star-Lord, but you are basically the coach for the rest of the team. You can tell Rocket to hack stuff, tell Groot to build bridges, or have Gamora slice things in half. It feels like you're actually leading a group of idiots who barely like each other. The banter is constant, and it is actually funny, not like that forced Marvel humor you see in some of the newer movies. They are always arguing and talking over each other while you walk through these crazy alien worlds that look like a neon fever dream. They also have this thing called the huddle mechanic, which is basically the coolest thing ever. When your team is getting beat up, you can call a timeout in the middle of the fight. Everyone gathers around and starts complaining, and you have to pick the right words to motivate them based on what they're saying. If you get it right, Peter flips his Walkman on, and a random 80s song like Kickstart My Heart or The Final Countdown starts blasting, while everyone gets a massive power boost. Eidos Montreal actually won Best Narrative at the Game Awards, and they totally deserved it. The story is way deeper than you'd expect for a superhero game. It deals with some pretty heavy stuff like grief and loss, but it never feels depressing because the characters have so much heart. Also, fun fact, the developer actually created a real-life heavy metal album for the fictional band Star-Lord just for this game, because that's where Peter got his name. It's that level of detail that makes the game feel special. It is a total shame that Square Enix said it didn't meet their sales expectations, because it is easily one of the best linear games of the last decade. It doesn't have a boring open world full of icons to check off. You just go from one beautiful level to the next, shooting aliens with your electronic blasters and making choices that actually change how the team treats you.
It's like this one doesn't feel paid!
The earlier Metro games were very tight and linear, all about dark tunnels, gas masks, and slow survival. Exodus keeps that soul, but finally lets the series breathe. The devs at 4A Games moved the story out of the Metro tunnels and into wider open areas, and that change alone makes the game feel fresh without losing what made it special. You still play as Artyom, still dealing with radiation, broken weapons, and low ammo. That part never goes away. What changes is the structure. Instead of being stuck underground the whole time, you travel across Russia on a train with your crew. Each major area is like a small open world. You explore at your own pace, loot buildings, help strangers, and stumble into danger without the game holding your hand. The gameplay feels slow and heavy in a good way. Guns jam, you clean them by hand, and ammo always feels limited. This is not a run-and-gun shooter. Every fight feels risky, and sometimes avoiding combat is the smarter move. Stealth matters a lot, especially if you want better endings. The game rewards patience instead of chaos. What really sells Metro Exodus is the atmosphere. The world feels quiet, lonely, and broken. You hear wind, creaking metal, distant sounds, and it keeps you on edge even when nothing is happening. Nighttime is especially tense. Mutants come out, visibility drops, and suddenly a simple walk turns into a survival situation. Story-wise, this is still very much a character-driven game. The people on the train feel like a real group, not just quest givers. You talk to them between missions, hear their worries, jokes, and arguments. Those small moments make the journey feel personal. This is one of those games where you actually slow down and listen. Some players did not like the open areas and preferred the old tunnel style. That is fair, but Exodus does something brave. It evolves the series instead of repeating itself. Usually when you play a Mafia game, you expect to be some guy in a fancy suit named Joey eating pasta and talking about the family, but they threw all of that out the window. They put you in the shoes of Lincoln Clay, a black Vietnam veteran in 1968, and they basically made a game about burning down the entire Italian mob from the outside. It's a revenge story that is so mean and so violent it makes the first two games look like a cartoon. The developers really put their soul into making New Bordeaux feel like a real place. It is probably the most atmospheric city I've ever seen in a sandbox game. You've got the jazz clubs, the swampy bayous, and the constant tension of the late 60s. The music is also just insane. They must have spent half the budget just getting the rights to the songs. You'll be driving a stolen muscle car while Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones is playing, and for a second you actually feel like you're in a high-budget movie. It's peak vibe gaming, even if the graphics have some weird lighting issues where the sun looks like a nuclear bomb is going off. Now, everyone complains that the game is repetitive, and yeah, it kinda is. You basically spend 30 hours doing the same three things: killing drug dealers, blowing up crates, and interrogating guys in the back of a car. But honestly, the combat is so heady and satisfying that I didn't even care. Lincoln Clay moves like a freight train. When you do a stealth kill, he doesn't just knock them out, he uses a huge combat knife to basically delete them. It feels way more real than most games where you just hide in a bush. You're not a superhero, you're a guy who was trained by the CIA to be a one-man army, and it shows in every animation. The coolest part is the underboss system. You have to manage 3 different lieutenants. Cassandra, Burke, and actually Vito Scaletta from Mafia II makes a comeback. When you take over a district, you have to decide who gets to run it. If you keep giving all the land to Vito because you like him, the other 2 will get pissed off and eventually they will literally betray you and you have to kill them. It's a great way to make your choices actually feel like they matter. Plus, the way the story is told through these fake documentary interviews from the future is genius. It makes the whole game feel like a true crime special on History Channel. Even though it had a rocky launch with a lot of bugs, the definitive edition fixed a lot of that junk. If you want a game with an actual story that has something to say, and you don't mind a bit of a grind, this is the one. It's gritty, it's loud, and it has the best ending of any open world game in that era. It's basically a middle finger to the traditional mob story, and that's why it's awesome. Batman Arkham Origins. This is the game that everyone loves to call the red-headed stepchild of the Arkham series, but honestly, those people are just wrong. Batman Arkham Origins came out in 2013, and it was a huge deal, because it was the first time Rocksteady didn't make the game. Instead, Warner Bros. Games Montreal took over, and everyone on the internet basically had a meltdown because they thought it was going to be garbage. But the truth is that the B team actually cooked something really special here that handles some things even better than the main trilogy. The story is a prequel, so you're playing as a younger, way angrier Batman who hasn't really figured out his I'm a symbol of hope vibe yet. He's just a guy in a suit who wants to punch criminals through walls. It's Christmas Eve in Gotham, and this guy Black Mask puts a $50 million bounty on Batman's head, which brings 8 of the world's deadliest assassins to town. You've got Deathstroke, Bane, Deadshot, and even Copperhead all trying to collect a paycheck by killing you. It makes the game feel like a gauntlet where you're constantly being hunted, and the boss fights are actually way better than what Rocksteady did. The Deathstroke fight is legendary because it's basically a high-speed game of Simon Says with martial arts, and if you mess up once, you're dead. Since it was a prequel, they had to replace the legendary voice actors Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. That seemed like a suicide mission, but Roger Craig Smith did an incredible job as a younger, more aggressive Batman, and Troy Baker basically did a perfect impression of Mark Hamill's Joker. This is actually the game that explains how Batman and Joker met, and the writing is top tier. There's a scene in a hotel that is probably the best Joker moment in the entire franchise. It shows that the developers at WB Montreal actually understood these characters, instead of just copying what came before. The gameplay is mostly the same as Arkham City, but they added these shock gloves that you get from Electrocutioner. I'm not gonna lie, these gloves are a total cheat code. Once you charge them up, you can just punch through shields and armored guys like they aren't even there. It totally breaks the combat balance, but it's so satisfying to finally bully the enemies that used to be annoying. They also fixed the detective mode, so you can actually reconstruct crime scenes in 3D, which makes you feel like the world's greatest detective, instead of just a guy following blue footprints on the ground. One thing that sucked back then was that the game launched with a ton of bugs, and the map was basically just Arkham City but with more snow, and a really long, annoying bridge in the middle that took forever to cross. But if you look past that, the atmosphere is peak. Gotham looks beautiful covered in snow and Christmas lights, and the music has this dark Carol of the Bells vibe that makes you feel like a terrifying urban legend. It's the perfect game to play during the winter when you want to feel like a ninja. It's also the only Arkham game that isn't included in the Return to Arkham collections, which is a total crime because it deserves way more respect than it gets. Respawn Entertainment clearly went bigger this time. More planets, bigger areas, deeper combat, and more freedom in how you play. It is still very much a single-player Star Wars game. No live service nonsense, no multiplayer focus, just a full story-driven experience. You play as Cal Kestis again, but this is not the same kid from the first game. He's older, more confident, and way more dangerous. The story takes place years after Fallen Order, and you can feel the weight on him. The Empire is still everywhere, and surviving as a Jedi is getting harder, not easier. Combat is where Survivor really shines. The lightsaber system is expanded with different stances, and they actually change how the game feels. You can play fast, slow, heavy, defensive, whatever fits you. Switching styles keeps fights fresh, and enemies push back harder than before. This is not a button mash game. Timing, blocking, and learning enemy patterns matters. Exploration is also much better. Some planets are huge, almost like mini open worlds. You have side quests, optional bosses, puzzles, and secrets everywhere. It rewards curiosity. You wander off the main path and almost always find something useful or interesting. Platforming is smoother too, and traversal feels less frustrating than the first game. A lot of people complained about performance at launch, and that criticism was fair. The game had issues. But underneath that, there is a really strong experience. The writing is solid, characters are likable, and it actually feels like Star Wars, not just a game with a skin on it. The music, sound design, and environments all sell the fantasy.
It's hard to breathe.
Hi-Fi Rush, this thing basically fell out of the sky in January 2023. Most games spend 5 years annoying you with trailers and delays, but Tango Gameworks just walked onto a stage at an Xbox event and said, "Hey, we made a new game and you can play it in 5 minutes." That kind of shadow drop almost never happens anymore because marketing teams usually want to squeeze every penny out of pre-orders. The craziest part is who made it. Tango Gameworks is the studio founded by Shinji Mikami, the guy who literally created Resident Evil. Before this, they were known for making The Evil Within, which is basically a game about being miserable in a dark hallway while monsters try to eat your face. So when they dropped this bright neon-colored rhythm game that looks like a Saturday morning cartoon, everyone was shocked. It was like seeing a goth kid suddenly show up to school in a Hawaiian shirt and start dancing. You play as this guy named Chai who wants to be a rock star, but he ends up getting a music player fused into his chest by a corrupt tech company called Vandalay. Now the entire world moves to the beat of the music. The trees sway to the beat, the machines stomp to the beat, and even your attacks are way stronger if you time them with the song. It's basically a character action game like Devil May Cry, but you have to have rhythm. The soundtrack is also legendary with bands like Nine Inch Nails and the Black Keys just blasting while you're destroying robots with a guitar made of scrap metal. But we have to talk about the corporate drama because it is honestly insane. Microsoft owned the studio and the game was a massive hit. It won awards, it had millions of players, and everyone loved it. Then, in a total villain move, Microsoft decided to shut down Tango Gameworks in 2024 anyway. It made absolutely zero sense and the entire internet was furious because it felt like the developers were being punished for actually making a good game. The game itself is pure joy. The animation is so smooth that it looks like a high-budget movie, and the characters actually have personalities that aren't just tough guy tropes. There's a robotic cat named 808 that helps you out, and she is basically the mascot of the year. If you want a game that feels handmade and creative instead of just another boring open-world checklist, you need to play this. It is easily one of the best things to come out of the Xbox era, even if the corporate bosses tried to kill it off.
Roper, clean up this mess.
Cat time. Let's go.
Until Dawn. Look, if you're the kind of person who yells at the screen during horror movies because the characters are doing something incredibly stupid, then Until Dawn is basically your chance to prove you're actually smarter than a teenager in a slasher flick. This game came out in 2015, and it was developed by Supermassive Games. Before this, they were doing random support work for Sony, but then they dropped this PS4 exclusive, and it basically changed the entire genre of choose-your-own-adventure games. The setup is a total classic horror trope. 8 teenagers go to a remote cabin on a snowy mountain to party and deal with some trauma from a year ago. Naturally, everything goes to hell immediately. You've got a masked psycho, creepy mines, and things bumping in the dark. The cast is actually stacked too. You've got Rami Malek before he won his Oscar, and Hayden Panettiere, and they did full motion capture, so the characters look eerily real. Well, mostly real. Sometimes they have uncanny valley teeth that make them look like they're trying to eat their own faces, but it adds to the creepiness. The whole gimmick here is the butterfly effect. Every little thing you do, like picking up a diary or being a jerk to your girlfriend, can ripple out and get someone killed 5 hours later. Most games lie to you and say your choices matter when they really don't, but in Until Dawn, you can literally finish the game with everyone alive or everyone dead. It's brutal. You'll be playing a don't move segment where you have to hold the controller perfectly still, and if your hand shakes even a little bit, your favorite character gets their head ripped off. It's pure stress in the best way possible. A cool bit of dev lore, this game was originally supposed to be a first-person PlayStation Move game for the PS3, where you used a motion controller as a flashlight. It looked okay, I guess, but Sony realized it was actually way better as a cinematic third-person game, so they moved it to the PS4 and overhauled the whole thing. That was the best decision they ever made, because it turned Supermassive into the go-to studio for horror. They've been trying to chase this high ever since with the Dark Pictures anthology and The Quarry, but honestly, nothing has quite hit that perfect teen Scream vibe like the original. It's the ultimate couch game, because even if you're not playing, watching someone else make terrible decisions is just as fun. It's got jump scares, it's got a weirdly deep story about Native American curses, and it has Peter Stormare being a creepy psychiatrist who talks directly to you. If you've got a long night ahead of you and want a game that feels like playing through a 10-episode Netflix series, this is it. Just don't be surprised when you accidentally kill off the person you were trying to save because you failed a QuickTime event. If you've ever watched a Jackie Chan movie or The Raid and thought, I could totally do that, Sifu is here to prove that you absolutely cannot. This game is a brutal reality check. It was developed by a French indie studio called Slow Clap and released in 2022. These are the same people who made Absolver, so they've basically spent their entire professional lives obsessing over how to make digital people punch each other in the most realistic way possible. The story is a classic Pac-Mei Kung Fu revenge tale. Your family is murdered by 5 martial arts masters, and you spend your whole life training to hunt them down. But here's the hook that makes the game legendary. You have a magic pendant that lets you come back to life every time you die. The catch is that every time you resurrect, you age. You might start the first level as a 20-year-old kid, but if you suck at the game, you'll be a 75-year-old man with a white beard by the time you reach the second boss. As you get older, you hit harder because you're wiser, but your health bar shrinks because, well, you're an old man. If you die after age 75, it's game over for real. The combat is some of the most satisfying stuff I've ever felt in a game, but it is steep. It's not a button masher. If you just walk into a room and start spamming square, a random guy with a lead pipe will absolutely humble you. You have to learn how to parry, how to structure your defense, and how to use the environment. You can kick a footstool at someone's shins, slam their head into a counter, or catch a bottle out of midair and throw it back. It's pure choreography. When you finally get into the zone, you feel like John Wick, but until then, you're basically a human punching bag. When the game first launched, it didn't even have difficulty settings. It was basically the developers saying, get good or get old. People complained so much that they eventually added an easier mode, but honestly, the struggle is the whole point. There's this one level called The Club that became famous because it was a total brick wall for players. People were reaching that boss at age 25 and leaving at age 70. It's a total test of patience and muscle memory. Slow Clap clearly loves cinema because the game is full of movie references. There is a whole sequence in a hallway that is a direct 2D tribute to the movie Oldboy, and it's one of the coolest things I've ever played. The art style is also gorgeous. It looks like a moving oil painting, which helps take the edge off the fact that you're getting your teeth kicked in for the 100th time. If you want a game that actually rewards you for learning its systems instead of just holding your hand, Sifu is a masterpiece. Just be prepared to feel very, very old by the time the credits roll. Battlefield Hardline. Yeah, it is the weird one in the Battlefield series. No big wars, no soldiers, no tanks rolling across fields. This time, it was cops and criminals, made by Visceral Games, the same studio behind Dead Space. A lot of Battlefield fans hated it for that reason alone, and most people never even gave the single player a fair shot. The campaign is structured like a TV crime show, literally. Each mission is an episode, with a recap at the start and credits at the end. It sounds cheesy, but it actually works. The story is short, focused, and paced like a bingeable series. You can finish it in a few sittings, and it never overstays its welcome. It feels more like a playable crime movie than a typical military shooter. Gameplay-wise, Hardline does something different for a Battlefield game. You are not always supposed to shoot first. A lot of missions reward you for using your badge, arresting suspects, sneaking around, and using gadgets. You can zip tie enemies, knock them out, or pull off clean arrests for bonus points. That choice alone makes it feel fresh compared to most shooters where every problem is solved with bullets. When things do go loud, the shooting still feels solid. The Frostbite engine does its thing with destruction, sound, and weighty gunplay. But the levels are smaller and more controlled than traditional Battlefield maps, which works better for single player. You are moving through city streets, buildings, and interiors, not massive empty spaces. What makes Hardline hold up today is how focused it is. It is not bloated. There is no padding, no open world busy work, no grinding. It tells a story, gives you fun mechanics, and ends. That is rare now. The characters are a bit over the top, but that fits the cop show vibe. You're not meant to take it super seriously. If you're bored and want a short single-player game that feels like a fun crime show you can play through, Battlefield Hardline is actually a solid pick. Ignore the multiplayer, ignore the Battlefield name, and treat it like a standalone action story. It works way better that way.
Problem, ma'am?
Lid doesn't fucking fit.
Well, good luck, ma'am.
Fuck you!
Talking about the Saboteur actually makes me kind of depressed because it was the final middle finger from a studio called Pandemic Studios. These guys were legends. They made the original Star Wars Battlefront and Mercenaries, but EA shut them down literally right before this game even hit the shelves in 2009. It's a total cult classic that deserved way more love than it got, and honestly, there hasn't been anything quite like it since. You play as Sean Devlin, who is this loud-mouthed, cigarette-smoking Irish race car driver stuck in Nazi-occupied Paris during World War II. He's not a soldier, he's just a guy who was incredibly pissed off because the Nazis killed his best friend, so he joins the French resistance to blow stuff up. The best part of the whole game is the will to fight mechanic. When you start in a district that is heavily controlled by the Nazis, the entire world is literally black and white. It looks like an old noir film where the only colors are the glowing red of the Nazi banners and the yellow of the streetlights. It is such a cool aesthetic. As you start blowing up fuel depots, assassinating generals, and taking back the city, color actually bleeds back into the world. You'll walk across the street and suddenly the sky turns blue and the flowers get their color back because you've inspired the people to fight. It's one of the most satisfying visual rewards in any open world game ever. Plus, since Sean is a racer, the driving feels great, and he can climb buildings like a slightly jankier version of Assassin's Creed, which is perfect for sniping Nazis from the top of the Eiffel Tower. This game was also famous, or infamous, for the Midnight Show DLC, which, well, it added a lot of nudity to the cabarets because it was 2009 and that's just how things were. But underneath all that edgy marketing, there was a really solid stealth action game. You could steal Nazi uniforms to sneak into bases, but if you ran or acted suspicious, they'd spot you immediately because Germans don't run. It's those little details that made Pandemic so good at what they did. It's definitely got that PS3 jank, where the map is a bit clunky and the explosions look a little dated, but the soul is 100% there. It's a tragedy that Pandemic was killed off before they could see how much people ended up liking this game. If you're tired of modern open-world games that feel like a job, the Saboteur is a reminder of a time when games were just about being a cool guy who blows up tanks with dynamite while wearing a flat cap. It's peak hidden gem material.
Ready? Then we're on our way.
Like a Dragon, Ishin, look, if you've ever played a Yakuza game and thought, this is cool, but I wish everyone had katanas and wore kimonos, then Like a Dragon Ishin is exactly what you need. This game has a wild history. It originally came out back in 2014 only in Japan, and for years, Western fans were basically begging RGG Studio to translate it. We finally got this Unreal Engine 4 remake in 2023, and honestly, it's like a fever dream for anyone who likes samurai movies. The developers did something hilarious here. Instead of making new characters, they just took the famous faces from the main series and cast them as historical figures from the 1860s. So you're playing as Sakamoto Ryoma, but he looks and sounds exactly like Kazuma Kiryu. It's basically the Yakuza Cinematic Universe actors putting on a school play about the end of the samurai era. You've got Majima running around as a high-ranking captain of the Shinsengumi, and seeing these legendary tough guys in historical outfits is just pure fan service that actually works. The combat is where things get really stupidly fun. You aren't just swinging a sword, you have 4 different styles you can switch between on the fly. You've got the swordsman style for classic duels, gunman where you literally just spam a revolver at people in the 19th century, and wild dancer where you use a sword in one hand and a gun in the other while spinning around like a deadly ballerina. It's fast, it's gory, and it's got all those heat actions where you do stuff like shove an orange into a guy's mouth and then punch it. It's peak RGG Studio nonsense. What makes this a great boredom killer is the sheer amount of side content. This studio is the king of distractions. You can spend 5 hours doing the main plot about political revolution and betrayal, and then spend the next 10 hours running a farm, cooking vegetables, and trying to pay off a debt for a girl named Haruka. Or you can go to the racing track and bet on chickens. I'm not even kidding. You can also collect trooper cards, which let you summon special powers in battle. Some of them literally let you shoot lightning out of your hands. It makes zero sense historically, but it's so fun, you just stop caring. This was a big moment for Sega, because it proved that Western audiences actually want these weird historical spin-offs. The game is a bit stiff in places because you can tell it's an older game design wearing a fresh coat of paint, but the heart is there. It's got that perfect mix of super serious drama about honor and absolute idiocy in the streets. If you want a game where you could feel like a legendary swordsman one minute and a world-class interior designer for a doghouse the next, this is the one.
江戸から土佐に戻って早々、なんであんな真似をした？あ？どうして下級武士の分際で上司に立てつくような真似をしたのかって聞いてんだ。あ
Devil May Cry 5, after years of silence and mixed feelings around the reboot, this game felt like a proper return. It sticks to what made Devil May Cry famous in the first place: fast combat, stylish action, over-the-top characters, and zero shame about being a video game. The structure is very straightforward. You move from mission to mission with no open-world fluff. Each level is built around combat arenas, short exploration, and boss fights. That sounds simple, but it works because the real depth is in how you fight, not where you go. The game constantly pushes you to play better and not just survive. Combat is the heart of everything. You play as multiple characters, and each one feels completely different. Nero uses mechanical arms that change how you attack and move. Dante is basically a walking combat system with multiple weapons and styles you can swap between in real time. V fights in a very strange way, commanding demons while staying back. It sounds messy, but once it clicks, it feels amazing. What makes DMC5 special is the style system. The game is always judging how cool you play. You can beat enemies by mashing buttons, but the game clearly wants more from you. Mixing moves, staying aggressive, and not getting hit turns fights into something almost like a rhythm game. It is not about realism, it is about looking cool and feeling in control. Story-wise, it is ridiculous, and that is the point. Demons, family drama, giant swords, stupid jokes, dramatic music, it fully embraces its own tone and never apologizes for it. The characters know how over-the-top everything is, and that confidence carries the whole game. As a single-player game today, Devil May Cry 5 still hits hard. It loads fast, respects your time, and gives you pure gameplay without distractions. Hitman Absolution. This is the game that almost turned the entire Hitman fanbase into a literal riot. It dropped in 2012 from IO Interactive, and it was such a weird departure from the silent assassin vibe of the older games. This was during that era where every developer was obsessed with making games look like a gritty action movie. Think Manhunt mixed with Grindhouse. It's all sweaty, dirty, and covered in a weird yellow lens flare, which is a massive change from the clean, professional look of the usual Agent 47 missions. The reason people lost their minds back then was because the game is way more linear. Instead of being dropped into a giant sandbox like a mall or an airport and told to go play, you're often stuck in these stealth corridors trying to get from point A to point B. It felt more like Splinter Cell than Hitman. But if you stop comparing it to the rest of the series, it's actually a total banger of an action stealth game. The story is completely unhinged. You basically go rogue to protect this girl named Victoria, and you end up fighting a giant guy in a wrestling ring and a squad of assassin nuns wearing latex and carrying rocket launchers. It's peak 2012 edginess, and honestly, it's kind of a vibe if you don't take it too seriously. The tech behind this game was actually insane for the time. This was the debut of the Glacier 2 engine, which allowed the devs to put hundreds of NPCs on screen at once without the console exploding. That scene in the crowded Chinatown market still looks better than some games that came out last year. They also introduced Instinct, which let you see through walls and slow down time to headshot 5 guys at once. Purists hated it, but it made you feel like a supernatural predator. Plus, the checkered suit 47 wears in this game is low-key his best look. A fun bit of trivia, the backlash to Absolution is actually why the newer Hitman trilogy, The World of Assassination, is so good. IO Interactive basically looked at all the angry forum posts and said, okay, fine, we'll give you the big sandboxes back. But Absolution has something those games don't, a weird, gritty soul. It feels like a Grindhouse movie where everything is gross and everyone is a villain. The kills are brutal, the voice acting from David Bateson is as cold as ever, and the disguise system, while totally broken because everyone in the same outfit can magically recognize you, is still fun to mess with. If you're tired of the perfect Hitman games where everything is a puzzle, Absolution is the one you play when you just want to go on a rampage through a dusty South Dakota town. It's the action movie version of Agent 47, and even if it's the black sheep of the family, it's still a hell of a lot of fun to play through. Kena Bridge of Spirits. What makes this game interesting right away is who made it. Ember Lab was not a game studio before this. They were an animation studio. They did short films and animation projects, and Kena was their first ever game. That matters, because the whole game feels like it was made by people who care a lot about visuals, timing, and small details, not just systems and numbers. At first glance, a lot of people thought Kena was a kid's game. Bright colors, cute little creatures, soft music. That first impression fooled many players. Once you actually play it, you realize this game has teeth. It expects you to pay attention. Enemies hit hard, bosses have real patterns, and you cannot just spam attacks and win. That surprise is a big part of why the game stands out. The setting is built around abandoned villages, old temples, and forests that feel quiet and lonely. You play as a spirit guide, someone who helps lost souls move on. The story is told in a very simple way. No long cutscenes every 5 minutes. You learn about people through the world, through short memories, and through what happened to the places they lived in. It feels calm, but also sad in a grounded way. Combat is where the game really earns respect. Kena uses a staff that works as both a melee weapon and a bow. You block, dodge, time your hits, and manage your abilities. Shields break, enemies rush you, and boss fights demand patience. On normal difficulty, it is already serious, and on higher difficulty, it can be punishing. This is not a cozy walking game pretending to be action. It is a real action adventure. The rot creatures are more than just visual fluff. They are part of the gameplay loop. You collect them by exploring, solving puzzles, and helping the world heal. In combat, they let you stun enemies, deal extra damage, or control the battlefield. Outside of combat, they help move objects, open paths, and solve environmental puzzles. They tie exploration, combat, and progression together in a clean way. The structure of the game is also very focused. You have hub areas that slowly open up as you gain new abilities. You revisit places, find hidden areas, optional fights, and small side stories. It never feels bloated. There's no pointless loot, no endless side quests, no systems fighting each other. Everything feeds back into the main experience. Kena came out during a time when a lot of games were chasing size instead of quality. Bigger maps, longer playtime, more filler. Kena did the opposite. It's a tight, well-made, single-player game that knows exactly how long it should be and sticks to it. That confidence shows. Some people did not like the difficulty spike or expected something more relaxed, and that's where most of the complaints come from. But if you approach it as a focused single-player adventure with real combat and strong art direction, it holds up extremely well today. Wolfenstein: The Old Blood is basically a love letter to everyone who misses the days when shooters were just about blowing up occult Nazis in a giant, creepy castle. This came out in 2015 as a standalone expansion to the New Order, and honestly, Machine Games absolutely nailed the B-movie horror vibe here. While the first game was this big, emotional story about the Resistance, The Old Blood is a prequel that says, hey, remember how cool Return to Castle Wolfenstein was back in 1991? Let's do that again, but with better graphics. You're back in the boots of BJ Blazkowicz in 1946, and the mission is simple. Break into Castle Wolfenstein, steal some secret coordinates, and try not to get your head caved in by a giant mechanical dog. The game is split into two halves. The first half is a classic prison break / stealth mission inside the castle, and the second half goes full supernatural. I'm talking about Nazi zombies falling from the sky because some crazy archaeologist dug up something she shouldn't have. It's glorious, trashy fun that doesn't try to be prestige art, it just wants to be a fun shooter. The best addition to this game is the pipes. It sounds stupid, but BJ carries these two pieces of industrial piping that he uses for everything. You use them to climb walls, you use them to pry open doors, and most importantly, you use them to stab Nazis in the neck. The takedowns with the pipes are some of the most brutal animations in the whole series. It gives the combat this really raw, physical feel that makes you feel like a desperate scavenger fighting for your life. Plus, you get the Kampfpistole, which is basically a pocket-sized grenade launcher. There is nothing more satisfying than turning a group of soldiers into red mist with a single shot from a tiny pistol. Machine Games is famous for their world building, and even in this shorter game, they killed it. The atmosphere in the village of Wolfberg is super eerie, and the way they mix 1940s tech with weird sci-fi uber soldats is peak Wolfenstein. They even kept the nightmare levels where you can find a bed and sleep to play a 3D version of the original 1992 game levels. It's a great nod to the history of the franchise and shows that the devs actually care about where the series came from. Since it was a standalone expansion, it was way cheaper than a full game, but it still feels like a complete experience. It's faster and more arcadey than the New Order, and it doesn't have as many cutscenes, which is great if you just want to get to the killing. If you're tired of modern shooters that spend 3 hours teaching you how to walk, this is the perfect antidote. It's just you, a pair of pipes, and a castle full of things that need to be blown up.
Gotta get out.
Max Payne 3, if you want to talk about a game that basically gives the player a 12-hour-long anxiety attack, Max Payne 3 is the undisputed heavyweight champion. This game is legendary, not just because it's a great shooter, but because it was the moment Rockstar Games decided to go full method. They didn't just make a sequel, they dragged Max out of his snowy New York comfort zone, shaved his head, and threw him into the sweltering heat of Sao Paulo, Brazil. The development story is pure Rockstar. They supposedly spent years doing field research in Brazil, capturing the look and feel of the favelas so accurately that the local gangs in the game actually feel terrifyingly real. This was the debut of the Euphoria physics engine at its absolute peak. In most games, when you jump, you're just an animation. In Max Payne 3, Max is a physical object. If you shoot dodge into a brick wall, Max doesn't just clip through it, he slams into it. His head bounces off the concrete and he groans in pain while trying to aim his gun from the floor. It's the most heavy and tactile combat ever put in a third-person shooter. But we have to address the elephant in the room, the story style. Rockstar's Dan Houser took over writing from the original creator, Sam Lake, and he turned the noir dial all the way up to depression. Max isn't just a sad cop anymore, he's a full-blown alcoholic mess who's constantly popping painkillers like they're Tic Tacs. The game uses these crazy visual filters, split screens, glowing text, and color distortions to make you feel as drunk and disoriented as Max is. Some people hated it because it felt like a try-hard action movie, but honestly, it's one of the few games that actually makes you feel the protagonist's mental state. One of the coolest, most low-key details is how Max carries his guns. In the first two games, you had a magic pocket that could hold 15 weapons. In Max Payne 3, if you're carrying a rifle, you literally see Max holding it in his left hand while he fires his pistol with his right. If you want to dual fist Uzis, he has to drop the rifle on the ground. It's a small touch, but it makes every shootout feel desperate. You aren't a superhero, you're an old, tired guy who is barely surviving. And the music? The band Health composed the soundtrack, and Tears is probably the most iconic song in gaming history for that final airport sequence. When that beat drops while you're sprinting through a terminal full of armored commandos, it's pure adrenaline. It's a shame we never got a part 4, but honestly, where do you even go after this? Max finally got a sunset walk, and he earned every bit of it. Ryse Son of Rome was the big, shiny launch title for the Xbox One back in 2013, and it was developed by Crytek. You know, the people who made Crysis and famously decided that gameplay is just something that happens in between looking at really high-resolution textures of mud. The development story of this game is actually a disaster. It was originally supposed to be a first-person game for the Xbox 360 Kinect. Imagine trying to fight off a Roman legion by waving your arms around in your living room like a crazy person. It would have been the worst game ever made. Microsoft realized this at the last second, scrambled to turn it into a third-person controller game, and rushed it out to be a launch title. It's a miracle it even works, honestly. But man, is it pretty. Even now, in late 2025, Ryse looks better than some games that were released yesterday. The faces, the armor, the way the blood splatters on the marble, it's peak CryEngine wizardry. You play as Marius Titus, a soldier who's basically the John Wick of Rome. He's pissed off, he's got a sword, and he's going to execute every barbarian in Britain until he finds the guys who killed his family. The controversy with this game was that it was basically one giant quick time event. The combat is super simple. You hit, you block, and then a giant icon appears over the enemy's head and you press X to decapitate them. It's basically a rhythm game where the reward is a slow motion execution. At launch, critics absolutely trashed it for being press X to win, but if you just want to feel like an absolute unit in a bronze chest plate for 6 hours, it's actually kind of a blast. It's also got a weirdly addictive co-op gladiator mode where the floor of the Colosseum literally changes while you're fighting. 1 minute you're in a forest, the next the floor opens up and you're in a desert. It was way ahead of its time for 2013. Crytek almost went bankrupt shortly after this, and we never got a sequel, which sucks because with a little more depth, this could have been Microsoft's answer to God of War. Instead, it's just a beautiful relic of the launch title era. Quantum Break came out in 2016, back when Remedy was experimenting and honestly taking a big risk. This was the studio that made Max Payne and Alan Wake, so they were already known for strong single-player stories. With Quantum Break, they tried something different, a game mixed with a live-action TV show all built into one package. It sounded strange on paper, and that is why a lot of people skipped it. The structure is very unique. You play a chapter of the game, then you watch an episode of a live-action show that reacts to the choices you made. The actors are real, not CGI, and they went all in on production. Real sets, real performances, full episodes. It feels like playing a sci-fi action game and then watching the next part of the story right after. If you treat it like a short interactive series, it actually works really well. The story is all about time going wrong. Experiments fail, time starts breaking, and the world slowly collapses. Remedy loves this kind of thing, and you can feel their style all over it. Lots of dialogue, strong characters, and that slow build where things keep getting worse. It is not hard to follow, but it does expect you to pay attention. Gameplay is third-person shooting mixed with time powers. You can slow time, freeze enemies, dash forward, and create shields. Combat is not super deep, but it feels good and looks cool. Enemies move differently because time is unstable, so fights have a rhythm to them. You're not just shooting normal targets standing still. Level design is mostly linear but detailed. Offices, labs, city streets, and broken spaces where time is falling apart. There are collectibles and notes if you want more story, but you can ignore most of it and still enjoy the main experience. The game respects that some players just want to move forward. At launch, the game had technical problems on PC, and that hurt its reputation a lot. That is one of the main reasons it gets overlooked. Underneath those issues, there's a solid single-player game with a clear vision. It's short, focused, and different from most shooters. Today, Quantum Break works best if you go in knowing what it is. It's not an open world, not a long RPG, not a mindless action game. It's a playable sci-fi show with strong presentation and a clear start and end. Before Your Eyes, let's pivot for a second, because Before Your Eyes is probably the most unique game on this entire list. This isn't some big budget shooter from a massive studio, it's an indie masterpiece from Goodbye World Games that came out in 2021. If you're bored of pressing the same 3 buttons to shoot things, this game is going to mess with your head, because you literally play it with your eyes. I'm not joking. The game uses your webcam to track your blinking. You play as a soul named Benjamin Bryn who is on a boat with a character called the Ferryman, and he's taking you to the afterlife. To get there, you have to relive your memories. The catch is that every time you blink in real life, the scene fast forwards. You might be having a sweet moment as a kid playing the piano, but if you blink, you're suddenly 5 years older, and that moment is gone forever. It's a genius mechanic because it mimics how life actually feels. You try so hard to hold on to the good times, but you can't keep your eyes open forever. The developers, Goodbye World Games, started this as a college project called Close Your, and it's one of those rare cases where a weird gimmick actually makes the story 10 times more emotional. You find yourself physically straining your eyes, trying not to blink, because you want to hear just one more sentence from your mom or see one more drawing you made as a kid. It turns the act of playing into this desperate struggle to stay in the moment. Now, a little warning, this game will absolutely destroy you emotionally. By the time you get to the end, you're going to be a mess, and the worst part is that your tears will probably make you blink, which makes the game skip even faster. It's like the game is mocking you for being sad. It's a short experience, maybe 90 minutes, but it stays with you longer than a 100-hour RPG.
We've got a long, beautiful day ahead of us.
Mirror's Edge. This was made by DICE, the same studio known for Battlefield, but instead of guns and war, they made a first-person game about movement. That alone was a risky move back then. First-person games at the time were almost all shooters. Mirror's Edge said no, let's make running the main thing. The world is clean, bright, and almost empty. White rooftops, blue skies, strong red highlights showing where to go. That art style is a huge reason the game is still remembered. It does not look realistic, but it looks clear and confident. You always know where you are and where you should move next. The city feels controlled, cold, and strict, which fits the story perfectly. You play as Faith, a runner who delivers messages by hand, in a city where everything is watched. The story is simple, and not the main reason people love the game. It is there to push you forward, not to stop you with long scenes. What matters is how it feels to move through the world. Movement is the entire game. Running, jumping, wall running, sliding, climbing, rolling. Everything connects smoothly if you do it right. When you get into the flow, it feels amazing. You are not thinking about buttons anymore. You are just moving. Missing a jump or losing speed feels bad, but when you nail a section, it feels earned. Combat exists, but it is clearly not the focus. You can disarm enemies, punch, kick, and sometimes use guns, but the game is at its best when you keep moving. Stopping to fight usually makes things worse. That design choice is what makes Mirror's Edge special. It encourages speed and momentum instead of violence. Level design is tight and intentional. Each area feels like a parkour course built by hand. Rooftops, cranes, offices, stairwells. You learn routes, shortcuts, and better ways to move through spaces. The game rewards practice. Replaying levels to improve your time is a big part of the experience. Mirror's Edge also came out during a time when games were starting to look darker and more realistic. Brown, gray, gritty. This game went the opposite direction, and that is why it still stands out today. The music, especially, adds to that feeling. Calm, electronic, almost lonely. It fits the mood of running alone across a quiet city. As a single-player game today, Mirror's Edge still works because it is focused. It does not waste your time. No skill trees, no loot, no filler. You start running, you learn, you get better, and you finish. That kind of design feels refreshing now. The Evil Within. If Hi-Fi Rush was Tango Gameworks wearing a Hawaiian shirt, The Evil Within is that same studio sitting in a dark basement, covered in blood and whispering to itself. This game dropped in 2014, and it was the grand return of Shinji Mikami. People were hyped out of their minds, because Mikami is basically the godfather of survival horror. He's the guy who directed the original Resident Evil and Resident Evil 4. This was his way of saying, modern horror games have become too much like action movies, so I'm going to make you suffer again. And man, do you suffer. You play as Sebastian Castellanos, a detective with the most generic sad cop energy ever, who gets pulled into a distorted nightmare world called STEM. The story is a total mess. It's like someone took a bunch of horror movie scripts, put them in a blender, and hit pulse. One minute you're in a creepy asylum, the next you're in a medieval village, and then suddenly you're in a city that's literally folding in half like Inception. It makes zero sense for the first 10 hours, but that's kind of the point. You're supposed to feel like you're losing your mind. The gameplay is classic Mikami resource management stress. You never have enough bullets. You'll find 2 matches and a single shotgun shell and have to figure out how to kill 3 invisible haunted guys. One of the coolest mechanics is that you have to burn bodies with matches to make sure they don't get back up. There is nothing more terrifying than running out of matches in a room full of corpses. It forces you to be smart, which is a nice change from games that just let you spray and pray. But we have to talk about the technical jank. When this game first launched, it had these massive black cinematic bars at the top and bottom of your TV screen that took up like 30% of your TV. It was supposed to make it look like a movie, but it really just made everyone feel claustrophobic and annoyed. Plus, the frame rate was struggling for its life on the PS3 and Xbox 360. Eventually, they patched in an option to remove the bars, but for a while, it was the most controversial design choice in horror history. Then there's the Keeper. You know, the guy with a literal safe for a head. He's basically the pyramid head of this franchise. Every time he shows up, you know you're about to have a bad time. The boss fights in this game are actually creative and disgusting, which is exactly what you want from a Mikami game. It's not a fun game in the traditional sense, it's greasy, it's frustrating, and it's genuinely hard, but it has that old-school survival horror DNA that you just don't see anymore in big AAA titles. If you want to see what happens when a developer gets handed a $500 million supercomputer and told to make a Pixar movie you can play, you look at Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. This came out in 2021 from Insomniac Games, and it was basically the only reason to own a PS5 for the first year of its life. While every other studio was still making games that had to run on your dusty old PS4, Insomniac said screw that and built this specifically to flex the power of that new SSD. The whole hook here is the dimension hopping. Because the SSD loads data so fast, you can jump through a literal purple hole in reality and instantly be on a completely different planet with 0 loading screens. Back in the day, you'd have to sit through a 30-second elevator ride or a squeeze through a tight gap animation while the game panicked in the background trying to load the next room. In Rift Apart, it happens in a blink. It's a total flex, and honestly, even 4 years later, it still feels like magic. But the real star of the show isn't even Ratchet, it's Rivet. She's the female Lombax from another dimension who actually has a personality that isn't just, I'm a hero who saves the galaxy. She's a bit cynical, she's a rebel, and she has a cool robot arm. The chemistry between the characters is actually great, and the writing is genuinely heartwarming without being too cringe. It's one of those rare games that your little brother can enjoy, but you'll actually stay awake playing, because the weapons are absolutely unhinged. Since it's an Insomniac game, the guns are the best part. You've got the topiary sprinkler, which literally turns enemies into garden hedges so you can smash them, and the ricochet, which is a ball you can bounce off a guy's head like 5 times in a row. It's chaotic, colorful, and the haptic feedback on the DualSense controller makes every trigger pull feel different. If you pull the trigger halfway, the gun does one thing. Pull it all the way, and it does another. It's the kind of stuff that makes you realize why we keep buying new consoles every 7 years. The only real L this game takes is that it's pretty short. You can 100% the whole thing in about 12 to 15 hours, which for a $70 game had some people crying in the comments back in 2021. But honestly, I'd rather have 10 hours of pure, polished perfection than 80 hours of walking through a desert picking up 500 hidden feathers. It's a snack of a game, but it's a gourmet snack.
How many pirates does
does Pierre have?
Maybe the fixer will help finish them off.
Gears of War 4. Microsoft created a whole new studio called the Coalition, headed up by Rod Ferguson, who worked on the original trilogy specifically to make sure they didn't mess up their golden goose. They played it incredibly safe, but honestly, after the weirdness of Gears of War Judgment, a back-to-basics game was exactly what the fans needed. The story jumps 25 years into the future. The Locusts are gone, the world is supposedly at peace, and we're following JD Phoenix, who is Marcus Phoenix's son. JD is a bit of a pretty boy compared to his dad's mountain of muscle vibe, and for the first 2 acts, you're mostly fighting robots called DBs. I'm not gonna lie, fighting robots in a Gears game felt like eating a salad at a steakhouse. It's fine, but it's not why I'm here. Luckily, the game eventually realizes this, brings back a cranky, retired Marcus Phoenix, and introduces the Swarm, which are basically the Locust but with a slimy new paint job. The gameplay is as tight as it's ever been. The Coalition didn't reinvent the wheel, they just greased it. The active reload system is still the most addictive mechanic in shooters, and they added wind flares, basically massive lightning tornadoes that turn the battlefield into a physics playground. You can shoot the brakes off a pile of pipes and watch the wind carry them into a group of enemies like a giant metal blender. It's peak Gears carnage. But the real reason people stayed was Horde 3.0. They added a class system: Soldier, Scout, Sniper, Heavy, and Engineer, and the Fabricator, which is a big box that lets you build defenses anywhere on the map. It turned the mode from hide in a corner to actual strategy. The downside? The loot boxes. This was 2016, so Microsoft went heavy on the gear packs. If you wanted a cool skin or better skills for Horde, you had to pray to the RNG gods or open your wallet. It was a grindy mess that almost ruined the multiplayer, but the core shooting was so good people tolerated it. One thing the B team at the Coalition doesn't get enough credit for is the visuals. Even today, Gears 4 looks incredible. The lighting during the storm sequences and the detail in the armor is top tier. It was the perfect technical showcase for the Xbox One S in the early days of 4K gaming on the PC. It proved that even without Cliff Bleszinski, Gears could still be a heavy hitter. It wasn't the most creative entry, but it saved the franchise from fading into obscurity.